The NASCAR season hasn't even started yet, but there's already some big controversies about this season. There's some new rules in 2025 that have very much rubbed up some drivers and some fans the wrong way, while some actually support these changes. I'm going to go over what exactly is going on here by reading out this article that I've written on themotorsportreports.com. But after that, I'm going to give my personal thoughts on this as well, go over the pros and cons, and there's some of that, of course, in this article too. But let's have a look at why some people are not too happy about this full article on motorsportreports.com. A new and controversial NASCAR rule designed for world-class drivers has the potential to grant Helio Castroneves an automatic entry into the Daytona 500. If the four-time Indy 500 winner utilizes this provision, it would result in the largest field for the race in a decade. The complex rule, which was introduced in the charter agreement signed by the 13 teams last September, is simply to a promoter's provisional and allows NASCAR to designate one driver as a guaranteed 41st entry. Three-time Daytona 500 winner Denny Hamlin expressed his disapproval of the rule, stating it reeks of desperation by NASCAR, calling it nothing but a gimmick to attract the big stars to stock car racing. Others questioned why the provisional was given to Castroneves, a 49-year-old making his NASCAR debut, instead of seven-time NASCAR champion and two-time Daytona winner Jimmie Johnson. The rule is intended for drivers who do not currently race full-time in NASCAR, making Johnson and 2017 Cup Series champion Martin Truex Jr. eligible for consideration. However, their teams did not submit a request, which must be done 90 days before the event. Trackhouse Racing was the only team to request the provisional for Castroneves, who enters Wednesday's qualifying as the sole driver eligible for the 41st spot. Let's see what some of these guys are thinking. Alex Bowman's commented on it, saying that I think Jimmie Johnson is a world-class driver, but I guess other people don't. It's an interesting rule for sure. There's a lot of hype and importance to the sport to have people like Castroneves that come in. If they miss the race, then it kind of hurts the whole thing. So I get it, but I also wish some of our past champions were respected in the same way in some sense. Castroneves will only use the provisional if he fails to claim one of the 4 open spots through traditional qualifying in what was originally intended to be a 40-car field. If he uses it, the 41 cars will be the most in the Daytona 500 since 2015, when 43 cars were still the standard. It's important to note that if Castroneves uses the provisional, Trackhouse and Castroneves will not receive any points or payouts, and all drivers who finish behind him will be moved up one position in the standings, and that just makes things complicated, doesn't it? The rule has divided the field, despite the fact he will likely only come into play at Daytona International Speedway, where the 9 drivers are competing for the 4 spots. NASCAR's charter system guarantees entry to 36 cars in every race. Tyler Reddick shared his perspective on the matter, saying, aside from the Daytona 500, we don't get in a spot very often where drivers of that caliber are going home. I don't know where to fall on this. On the one hand, I would hate for a guy like Lewis Hamilton to come over here and attempt to start the 500 and something keeps him from running the race. We also don't want to just let them have a spot in the race, like they have to earn it. In the event that NASCAR receives multiple requests for the provisional, the organization will decide the designated world-class driver ahead of the event. The criteria listed in the charter for the rule states, if the open exemption position is intended for a driver who will significantly impact the promotion of the event and grow the prominence of the sport. They're being honest about it, at least with that quote, aren't they? That is what it is. I think it is a money thing at the end of the day. And what did I say? I saw that there was a record gate already. The sales for the Daytona 500 was in the many millions of dollars. It's a massive event, is the 500. This won't happen every week, and this won't be happening for New Hampshire or something like that. This is something that's only really going to come into play with the really big races like the Daytona 500, the Coke 600 maybe, Talladega, stuff like that. But it's a controversial issue for sure. John Prost, NASCAR Senior Vice President of Racing Development, addressed the hypothetical scenario during a competition briefing last month. When asked what NASCAR would do if 7-time Formula 1 champion Lewis Hamilton, 4-time champion Max Verstappen, and 6-time IndyCar champion Scott Dixon and NASCAR Hall of Famer Jimmy Johnson also submitted a request to the same race. Prost responded, "I'd love to have that problem." Didn't answer the question though, did he? That's a tough one. NASCAR could face this dilemma later this year when the series visits Mexico City, as several teams are exploring deals to enter Juan Pablo Montoya into the race. Of course, the Colombian is a rather famous driver and an ex-NASCAR driver too. Watkins Glen last season as well, I believe. Additionally, the inaugural street race in Chicago saw Shane Van Gisbergen, who won the event and subsequently left his Australian V8 Supercars career behind for NASCAR, demonstrating the potential for an unexpected entry. In recent years, former F1 drivers have made appearances in NASCAR races. The 2025 Indianapolis race featured Jenson Button and Kamui Kobayashi, while Button and Kimi Raikkonen, both F1 champions, competed in the same field at the Circuit of the Americas. Chase Elliott expressed his mixed feelings on the matter, saying, "I can argue both sides of the fence. You'd hate to have Castro Neves, Verstappen, Hamilton or someone come into a race and miss the show due to something silly. So I can certainly see that aspect from it promoter-wise. But I also think with this prestigious race, there should be some sort of integrity of making the show. I think that's part of what makes the race prestigious. You know, it's hard and a hard event to make. If you see that with the Indy 500 or you see that at the Chili Bowl, right? It's a hard race to make. It's a big deal to get into the show. I just don't want to ever degrade or hurt the long-term integrity of the sport and take the prestige out of events that should be some of our biggest days of the year." So yeah, it's complicated, and like a lot of drivers there do sum up very well, it's a controversial issue in the sense that there is no right or wrong answer here. You could even go so far as to say, well, for all races, there should not be chartered entries. You should have to qualify on merit for the event, like the Indy 500, I think, although no, them as well. I do apologize for that. Yeah, so I mean, and that system in IndyCar, for example, has meant that the likes of Fernando Alonso, even though he's a double world champion, didn't start one of the years because McLaren's absolutely messed up their program, and that's the risk that you take being a non-chartered entry. So you could argue that as well. You could say, well, chartered entry should not be guaranteed entry, or not have chartered teams and stuff like that in NASCAR. You could go as far as to say that. But in the situation we are in, it's tough because I understand it from the money point of view. There will be people there that go from Brazil. There'll be some that want to see Castro Neves do, because Castro Neves is Brazilian. They'll want to see him do, and there'll be IndyCar fans as well. So I want to see Castro Neves on his debut, and then to be sent home is a pretty bitter pill to swallow. It's like in England, when it's bad weather and football matches get postponed. It's part and parcel of the game, but that doesn't mean that it's a good thing. It's kind of messing things up for people. So I am really on the fence of it. I do understand why they're doing it. My question would be, to be honest, why are we on 40 cars now in NASCAR? Why can't we just go for 43 like we used to back in my day? NASCAR Chronicle remembers those days. So it's a whole can of worms, and I feel like the drivers are hitting the nails on the head when it comes to the opinions about this. But I want to get your opinion as well, guys. What do you think about this? Should the system change? Should Castro Neves not be assured qualified? Should it be Castro Neves that is assured of qualifying for the event? Because, yeah, like they say, Truex Jr., former champion, Johnson, 7-time champion, and what they were saying about Jimmy Johnson being a world-class driver. He was a world-class driver. I don't think he's on that level anymore. If anybody who saw him in 2024 when he did enter, he was just making up the numbers basically. And don't get me wrong, and that's not me insulting Johnson, because I mean, when I first started watching NASCAR, he was the guy. I've always said he was the Michael Schumacher of NASCAR. The guy was unbelievable. He won 5 championships in a row, I think, didn't he? The guy was world class. Absolutely, one of the greats, one of the GOATs, undeniably. But he's not on that level anymore. So then you think, well, he should have to qualify for it. But I feel, again, be honest, right? I know Castro Neves is in his first NASCAR race, but who's going to have more fans at the event? Are there going to be more people supporting Johnson or Castro Neves? I would bet quite a bit of my money and say that it would be Johnson. The fan base that the guy has had over the decades, he must be, surely. It has to be, surely. So, yeah, I can see both arguments for and against. I want to hear what you have to say, though. Like, share, comment, subscribe as always here to see much more content on the world of NASCAR, guys. See you soon. Have a great day. Let's have a great race this weekend to start the season.